The galaxy was vast, full of stars and countless worlds, but not every world was kind. On the edge of forgotten space, there was a mining colony where silence was louder than life. Broken machines rusted under a pale sky. The air was thin, cold, and heavy with dust. It was here that she lived. She was a giant. Her body was taller than towers, her arms strong enough to bend steel. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, like twin moons. Every step she took made the ground tremble. To strangers, she looked like a weapon born to crush. To her own people, she was a mistake. Her kind had rejected her. She was too large, too frightening, too different. When she was young, they whispered that she would bring ruin. As she grew, they turned whispers into chains. When chains broke under her strength, they gave her exile instead of belonging. They left her here, on this broken world, far from the light of any true home. She wandered the abandoned mines, speaking to no one. The walls of rock became her only companions. The machines she once tried to repair fell apart in her hands. The silence cut deeper than any weapon. Days passed without meaning. Nights passed without dreams. She told herself she did not need anyone. Yet in the deepest part of her heart, loneliness grew like fire without air. Sometimes she looked at the sky. Stars glittered far away, but they never spoke to her. She wondered if she would die nameless, another shadow swallowed by forgotten space. She wondered if the universe had made her too big to be loved. One day, the silence broke. It began as a hum in the sky. A sound she had not heard for years. Engines. Small, sharp, alive. She lifted her head and saw light cutting through the dust. A ship descended, flames burning at its edges. Her chest tightened. Visitors never came here. Not willingly. The ship landed on cracked ground, its ramp lowering with a slow hiss. She stayed still, her giant frame hidden behind the remains of a broken crane. Her heart pounded like thunder inside her chest. She told herself it would only be scavengers, or raiders, or perhaps machines. No one came here with kindness. Then she saw him. A human stepped out. Small compared to her. Fragile compared to her. His body was thin, wrapped in a dark suit, his face half hidden under a mask. Yet his movements were calm. Not fearful. He walked slowly, scanning the ground, then the sky. His eyes lifted, and for a moment she thought he looked straight at her. She froze. No one had ever looked at her without fear. The human did not run. He did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he took another step forward, as if the cold world belonged to him. His gaze lingered on the ruins, then on the shadows. She felt her breath grow heavier. She wanted to stay hidden, but something inside her stirred. A voice whispered, "Go." She stepped into the open. The ground shook as her massive feet crushed the dust. Her head rose above the ship, her shoulders wide enough to block the pale sky. She expected him to scream, to fall back, to fire his weapon. Every other being had done the same. The human did none of these things. He looked up. His eyes widened, not in terror, but in awe. For a long breath, there was only silence between them. Then, softly, he spoke. "You are not a monster." The words struck her harder than stone. She stared down, uncertain. Did she hear correctly? The human's voice carried again. Steady. Gentle. "You are beautiful." She felt her chest tighten, a strange heat filling her heart. The mining world seemed to fade. The cold air felt lighter. For the first time in her long life, she did not feel unwanted. She wanted to believe the words, but fear clawed at her. Beautiful was not a word she had ever been given. Weapon. Beast. Mistake. Those were her names. Could a human truly mean it? Her hands trembled as she lowered her head. Her glowing eyes fixed on him. He did not flinch. He stepped closer instead, his small frame fearless in front of her shadow. "You are beautiful to me." The last words came like a whisper, yet they thundered inside her soul. She stood there, frozen, torn between disbelief and a fragile hope she had buried for years. The dust around them swirled as if the world itself was listening. And in that moment, something changed. The giant who had once been unwanted, cursed, and forgotten, now faced a human who saw her not as a monster, but as something more. The galaxy outside remained vast and cruel. Yet in this fragile corner of space, under a pale sky, a new story began. The air was still after the words were spoken. The giant did not move. Her heart pounded like war drums inside her chest, yet her body felt locked in stone. The human stood before her, a figure so small, so fragile, yet he had shaken the silence that ruled her life. "You are beautiful to me." The sound echoed again inside her mind. It felt impossible. She had been called many things before. Too large. Too dangerous. Too unwanted. But never beautiful. Not once. Her breath came heavy. She lowered her head closer, and her shadow fell over him. She wanted to see his face clearly. His mask was still over his mouth, but his eyes were visible. They were not afraid. They carried a strange light. Curiosity. Warmth. Something she had not seen in centuries. "Why?" her voice rumbled. It was deep, like stone cracking. "Why do you say this?" The human tilted his head. He took a careful step forward. She expected hesitation, but there was none. His voice was steady, simple, and clear. "Because it is true." The words made her chest tighten again. She wanted to believe, yet disbelief held her. She thought perhaps humans were different. Perhaps this one was mad, or perhaps he lied to gain her trust. But his eyes did not look like lies. His gaze was steady, soft, as if he had seen her scars and decided they were not chains, but stories. Her enormous hand moved without thought. Slowly, carefully, she placed it upon the ground close to where he stood. The earth shook as her claws pressed into the dust. She meant it as a warning, but also a test. Would he step back? Would he finally show fear? He did not. He lifted his hand instead, small against the air, and placed it upon the tip of her finger. His skin was warm, alive, trembling slightly, yet the touch was real. He looked up at her, his lips curling into something she had seen only in stories. A smile. "You have carried pain for too long," he whispered. "But I see more than your size. I see the strength that kept you alive. I see the soul that the galaxy tried to break. And I see beauty." Her vision blurred for a moment. She did not understand why. The air stung her eyes, and then she realized. Tears. Real tears, falling from eyes that had never cried for kindness. She turned away quickly, ashamed. Her voice shook. "Do not speak this way. I am nothing to you. I am a shadow. A mistake." The human stepped closer again. His voice rose, not in anger, but in defiance against her despair. "No. You are not a mistake. You are here. You survived what others could not. That is not failure. That is strength." She stared at him, caught between fear and wonder. The universe had given her only chains. Now this human offered words that felt like keys. Silence stretched again, heavy and fragile. She did not know what to say. Her heart wanted to accept his words, but her mind warned her not to believe. Yet the warmth of his touch stayed on her skin, and the sound of his whisper stayed in her chest. At last she spoke, her voice low, careful, almost afraid. "You are not afraid of me?" The human shook his head. "No. I should be. But I am not." "Why?" she asked again. He looked up, and this time his smile widened. "Because even if you are too big for this world, you are not too big for me." Her breath caught. His words were not like the harsh voices of her kind. They were not curses, not chains. They were a promise. The mining world seemed smaller now, as if the ruins themselves bent closer to listen. The wind carried the dust away, leaving the ground between them clearer than before. It was as if the universe itself paused to witness this moment. For the first time in her long life, she knelt. Slowly, carefully, she lowered her massive frame until her face was level with him. Her glowing eyes met his human gaze. She had never been this close to anyone without them running, screaming, or attacking. Yet here he stood, steady as a mountain, fragile as a flame, yet burning with courage. "What is your name?" she asked softly. He answered without hesitation. His name was simple, short, and human. A sound that carried no chains. She repeated it, her voice trembling with unfamiliar warmth. She had never spoken a name like it before. It felt strange on her tongue, but powerful in her heart. He smiled again when she said it. The sound of her deep voice shaping his name seemed to please him. In that moment, something invisible but unbreakable began to form. A bond. Fragile yet strong. Simple yet impossible to ignore. The giant who had been unwanted, and the human who dared to whisper, now stood on the edge of something neither had expected. The galaxy had given her exile. The galaxy had given him danger. But together, under a pale sky filled with silent stars, they found the beginning of a story that could not be broken. The whisper had changed everything. The days that followed were no longer silent. The human remained on the mining world, and the giant who had once lived only with shadows began to feel something new. At first, their words were broken, scattered like fragments of stone. Her voice was deep and heavy, difficult for him to understand. His voice was quick, light, and full of sounds she had never spoken before. Yet neither gave up. Each night, under the pale light of the stars, she tried to repeat his words. Each morning, he listened patiently, correcting her with a smile. She learned simple things first. His name. The word for sky. The word for friend. Each word felt like a seed planted in empty ground, and slowly the ground began to bloom. He, in turn, tried to learn her language. The sounds were harsh, rumbling, and far too strong for his small voice. But he tried anyway. When his tongue stumbled and failed, she laughed. It was a sound she had not made for centuries, low and echoing, but it carried warmth. The human laughed with her, and the cold world seemed less empty. They shared food, though it was never easy. She ate in great quantities, crushing metal cans of supplies in her massive hands. He ate small portions, delicate compared to her hunger. Once she tried to cook as he had shown, but her fingers broke the tools, and the fire nearly consumed the shelter. She felt shame rise again, old memories of being unwanted. But the human only laughed, not in cruelty but in joy, and he said, "It is perfect." The bond grew not in grand acts but in small ones. He walked beside her enormous shadow. She carried him across ground too rough for his steps. He repaired small machines with delicate hands, while she moved mountains of stone with a single push. Their strengths were different, yet together they filled the gaps that loneliness had carved into their lives. At night he told her stories of Earth. He spoke of oceans that stretched farther than sight, of cities filled with light, of forests that breathed like living beings. She listened in silence, her glowing eyes fixed on him. The images painted in his words stirred her heart. She had never seen oceans. She had never walked in forests. For the first time, she wanted to. When he grew tired, she kept watch. Her massive body shielded him from the cold wind. He slept soundly, trusting her with his life. She had never been trusted before. It was a gift more precious than any star. One night, as he slept near the fire, she looked at him for a long time. His face was soft, unguarded, and peaceful. She thought of how small he was, how easily the galaxy could crush him. She thought of how fragile his bones must be, yet how fearless his spirit was. The thought made her chest ache with something she could not name. Perhaps it was love. The word frightened her. She had been taught that love was not for her kind. Love was for the beautiful, the chosen, the desired. Yet when she looked at him, she felt a warmth she could not deny. The next morning, she asked a question that had weighed on her heart. Her voice was quiet, almost breaking. "Why do you stay here? You could leave. You could find others. Why stay with me?" The human looked at her, and for a moment he did not answer. Then he walked to her side, his hand brushing against her massive arm. He looked up, his eyes steady. "Because you are not alone anymore. And because I choose you." The words struck her deeper than any weapon. She turned her face away, afraid of what he might see in her eyes. But he did not need her to answer. He knew. From that day, their bond became unshakable. They worked together to rebuild the ruins around them. He repaired machines to draw water from the ground. She moved broken metal into place, forming walls for shelter. The world that had once been dead began to feel alive again. The giant who had believed she was too unwanted to be part of anything now found herself building a life with another. The human who had been fragile in her eyes became her strength in ways she had never imagined. Yet far above, the stars still watched. And in the shadows of those stars, threats were moving. Other eyes had begun to notice the strange pair on the mining world. Ships passed in the distance, scanning, watching, marking their presence. The peace they built would not last forever. But for now, under the cold sky, the bond grew. Stronger each day. Stronger than fear. Stronger than the chains of the past. And in her heart, for the first time, the giant believed she was no longer too big, nor too unwanted. She was something more. She was chosen. The mining world was no longer silent. The giant and the human had filled it with life. Fires burned warm at night. The sound of laughter replaced the echoes of broken machines. What was once only dust and ruin now held the shape of home. But the stars above never rested. Far beyond, eyes were watching. The rival fleet had long searched these forgotten edges of space. Raiders, scavengers, and hunters. They sought resources, slaves, and anything they could bend to their will. When their scanners caught the strange signal of a working human vessel, they turned their ships toward the quiet mining world. They expected weakness. They expected prey. The first shadows appeared on the horizon one morning. The giant saw them before the human did. 3 black shapes moving across the sky, silent and sharp. Her chest tightened. She knew those shapes. Raiders. The human followed her gaze and his face grew hard. He did not run. Instead, he stepped closer to her side. She felt his hand brush against her arm, small yet steady. "They will come for me," he said quietly. "They always see humans as easy to take." Her heart twisted. She had known exile, shame, and loneliness. But now she knew something else. She knew what it felt like to be chosen. To be trusted. She could not lose that. She could not lose him. Her voice was low, trembling with anger. "They will not take you." By nightfall, more ships appeared. Dark vessels circled like vultures in the sky. Their engines shook the ground. Lights cut through the dust, searching, scanning. The raiders broadcast their voices through the air, cruel and mocking. "We know you are here, human. We know you hide with the unwanted giant. Hand yourself over and we may leave her to rot. Resist, and both of you will die." The giant stood tall, her glowing eyes fixed on the sky. Their words cut deep, dragging old wounds back to the surface. Unwanted. The word had followed her since birth. Once, she would have believed it. Once, she would have bowed her head and accepted it. Not now. She turned to the human. He looked up at her, his expression calm. Fear was there, but it did not control him. He reached up, placing his hand gently against her massive arm. "You are not unwanted," he whispered. "Not to me. Never to me." Her body trembled. The old shame tried to rise again, but his voice was stronger. She let his words root deep inside her heart, and she found strength she did not know she carried. The raiders landed. Their ships struck the ground like falling blades. From them poured soldiers wrapped in dark armor, carrying weapons that glowed with fire. Their laughter filled the air, cruel and cold. The leader stepped forward, his voice loud. "Giant, step aside. You are nothing. The human belongs to us now." The giant lowered her head, her eyes burning like fire. She moved to stand before the human, her body casting a shadow over him. Her voice rolled like thunder across the barren land. "He belongs to no one but himself. You will not touch him." The raiders laughed. Their weapons aimed. To them, she was only a broken exile. Too big to belong anywhere, too easy to crush with numbers and fire. But they did not know the truth. They did not know that for the first time, the giant had something worth fighting for. The human stepped closer to her side, his voice calm yet fierce. "You are not alone. I am with you." Her chest surged with fire. No longer the fire of loneliness, but the fire of defiance. She spread her arms wide, her massive body a wall between the raiders and the human. The ground trembled under her feet. Her voice rose, strong and unbreakable. "If you want him, you will have to pass through me." The raiders readied their weapons. The air grew tense, charged with the weight of battle. The human pressed his hand once more to her skin, steady and sure. She looked down at him, and in his eyes she saw trust. She saw love. She saw the reason she had been given life. For years, the galaxy had told her she was too big, too unwanted, too broken to matter. Now, facing the coming storm, she understood a truth greater than exile. She was not unwanted. She was his shield. She was his strength. The battle had not yet begun, but already the giant had made her choice. She would not surrender. She would not bow. She would stand, no matter the cost. The raiders raised their weapons, laughter twisting into cruel commands. The air filled with heat and light as fire prepared to strike. The giant drew her breath deep, her muscles burning with power. The human's voice reached her ear one last time before the storm. "You are mine, and I am yours." With those words, the night shattered into war. The first shot lit the sky like a false star. A streak of fire tore through the night, striking the ground at the giant's feet. Dust exploded into the air. The raiders shouted with cruel joy, certain their prey would break. But the giant did not move. Her enormous frame rose tall, her eyes glowing with fire of their own. She spread her arms wide, shielding the human behind her. The ground shook as she took a single step forward. The raiders opened fire. Bolts of energy screamed through the air. They struck her skin, burning, cutting, leaving trails of smoke across her massive body. Pain surged through her, but she did not falter. Each shot only drove her deeper into rage, not for herself, but for the human she protected. With a roar that split the night, she charged. The earth cracked under her steps as she closed the distance. Her arms swung wide, striking two raiders at once. Their bodies flew into the air like broken dolls, their weapons scattering across the ground. More fire rained against her, but she did not stop. She reached down, seizing one of the raider machines, and ripped it apart with her bare hands. Sparks lit the sky as the machine collapsed into ruins. The human remained behind her, his eyes locked on her massive figure. Fear clung to him, yet so did pride. He shouted words she barely heard above the roar of battle. "You are not alone. I am here." Her strength grew with every sound of his voice. She struck again and again. Each swing of her arm shattered enemies. Each step crushed armor and steel. The raiders who once laughed now screamed, their confidence broken by the storm that rose against them. But the enemy was many. More ships descended from the sky, their weapons unleashing fire that scorched the ground. Explosions lit the horizon, throwing shadows across her body. She staggered under the storm, her skin torn, her strength pushed to its limits. For a moment, the old voice of doubt whispered in her heart. Too big. Too unwanted. Too broken. Then she felt a touch. The human's hand pressed against her leg, steady, firm. She looked down, and in his eyes she saw no fear. Only faith. "You can do this," he called, his voice fierce. "You are mine, and I believe in you." Her roar shook the sky. With fire burning in her heart, she leapt forward. Her massive hands tore through the enemy line, ripping weapons from their grasp. She seized a fallen cannon and turned it against the fleet, sending bolts of light back into the sky. Ships exploded one by one, their dark forms burning into ash. The raiders panicked. They had come expecting prey. Instead, they faced a storm. She fought not as a beast, not as a weapon, but as a protector. Every strike was for him. Every roar was for him. Every wound she took was to keep him safe. Blood ran down her arms, but her spirit burned brighter than fire. The leader of the raiders shouted orders, calling his forces to surround her. They poured fire into her chest, forcing her to her knees. The human cried out, rushing to her side. His small hands pressed against her wounds, desperate, trembling. "Stay with me," he begged. "Please stay." Her body shook, but she lifted her head. Her glowing eyes locked onto the leader's ship. She knew this battle could not end until the head of the snake was crushed. With a deep breath, she pushed herself up. Pain screamed through her body, but she rose. She charged one last time. The leader fired everything he had, but she did not stop. Energy tore through her skin, but she pressed forward. With one final strike, she seized the leader's ship in her burning hands and ripped it apart. The explosion lit the sky brighter than the stars. Silence followed. The battlefield grew still. The raiders who survived fled into the night, their courage broken. The sky cleared of fire. Only smoke and ruin remained. The giant staggered, her body shaking. Her knees struck the ground. She felt herself falling into darkness, her strength drained. But before the shadow could take her, the human was there. His arms wrapped around her massive hand, his voice breaking but strong. "You saved me," he whispered. "You saved us both." She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Tears burned her eyes as she looked at him. She had never fought for anyone before. She had never been needed, never been loved. But now, as his touch steadied her, she understood. The battle was not just survival. It was proof. Proof that she was more than exile. More than a mistake. Proof that she was his, and he was hers. The fire in the sky faded. The night grew quiet again. But in their hearts, something far greater had been set ablaze. The battlefield was quiet. Smoke drifted across the broken ground. The fires of ruined ships glowed faintly in the night, their light painting the sky with red and gold. The bodies of raiders lay scattered among the dust, silent now, their weapons twisted and useless. In the center of it all stood the giant. Blood stained her arms, her legs, her chest. Her body trembled from pain, but she still stood, refusing to fall. Her eyes glowed weakly, their fire dimmed but not gone. Beside her, the human ran forward. He reached her hand, small against the weight of her skin. His voice shook as he called out. "You are alive! Stay with me. Please stay." She looked down at him, her breath heavy, her chest rising and falling like thunder. Slowly, she sank to her knees. The ground shook under her weight. Dust rose in clouds around her. For a moment, he feared she would collapse completely. But she lifted her head, her glowing eyes finding his. "I am here," she whispered. Her voice cracked yet carried strength. "Because of you." The human pressed his hand against her skin. His touch was warm, though his body trembled with exhaustion. His eyes glistened with tears he tried to hide. "You saved me," he said softly. "You saved everything." She wanted to laugh, but her voice broke into silence. She thought of the pain, the fire, the battle. She thought of the blood that ran down her body. None of it mattered. What mattered was his hand on her skin. What mattered was the look in his eyes, full of trust and love. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of tears roll down her face. They fell into the dust below, heavy as stones, burning with all the years she had carried loneliness. She lowered her head until her face was close to him. Her massive body curved around him, shielding him from the cold night wind. "You gave me a reason," she said, her voice trembling. "I fought not to survive. I fought because you are mine." The human reached up, his fingers brushing against her cheek. His touch was gentle, as if her scarred skin was the most precious thing he had ever known. "And you are mine," he whispered back. The words broke something inside her, but not in pain. The chains of exile that had bound her heart shattered. For centuries she had believed she was nothing more than a mistake. But here, in the hands of a fragile human, she had become more. The fire of the battle faded. The night grew still. Above them, the stars burned quietly, as if watching in silence. She leaned closer, lowering her head until her forehead touched the ground near his body. It was the closest she had ever bowed to anyone. Yet it was not shame. It was devotion. The human did not step away. He moved closer, pressing his small body against her massive hand. His warmth spread into her skin, into her heart. He closed his eyes and whispered, "You are safe now. We are safe." Her body shook with pain, but also with peace. For the first time, the silence of the mining world no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like a sanctuary. Not because the land had changed, but because she was no longer alone. The night stretched long. He stayed with her, tending to her wounds with what little supplies he had. His hands worked carefully, though his body grew weary. She watched him with silent wonder. A human so small, so fragile, yet he carried a strength greater than any weapon. A strength of heart. When the fire of the ships burned low, and the stars stood clear again, she spoke. Her voice was soft, but filled with new truth. "I once thought I was too big for anyone. Too broken for love. Too unwanted for life." She paused, her glowing eyes fixed on him. "But then you came. And you showed me I was wrong." He looked up at her, his face lit by the faint glow of starlight. His lips curved into a tired but honest smile. "You were never unwanted. You were only waiting for me to find you." The words filled her with warmth deeper than fire. She lowered her hand to the ground, palm open. He stepped onto it without hesitation, and she lifted him gently until he stood near her face. She looked at him closely, memorizing every line of his fragile form, as if he were the most important treasure in the galaxy. She whispered one last truth. "You are my heart." The human placed his hand against her cheek again. His voice was steady, carrying all the love he held. "And you are mine." The stars above shimmered brighter, as if the universe itself bowed to their bond. The raiders were gone. The battle was over. But something greater had been born in its place. Not fear. Not exile. Love. The days after the battle felt like a dream. The silence of the mining world returned, but it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was a silence filled with peace. The smoke of the ruined ships faded into the sky. The broken ground healed slowly under their hands. For the first time in her long life, the giant did not feel trapped by exile. She felt free. The human remained by her side. Together they rebuilt what the raiders had destroyed. He repaired the machines that still worked, coaxing life from their rusted frames. She lifted the broken walls and carved new shelters from the rock. Piece by piece, the world around them changed. What was once only dust and ruin became a place of warmth. Yet it was not the machines or the walls that gave the world meaning. It was the bond between them. At night, they sat together under the stars. He spoke of earth again, of oceans and forests, of skies filled with blue. She listened with quiet wonder, her heart painting each image as if she could see them herself. Sometimes she told her own stories. Stories of her people. Stories of exile. Stories of the shame that had once chained her soul. He never turned away. He listened to every word, his eyes steady, his voice soft when he told her, "You are not what they said you were. You are more." The wounds of her body healed, though scars remained. She touched them sometimes, remembering the fire and the pain. But now, when she looked at them, she did not see weakness. She saw proof. Proof that she had fought for something greater than herself. Proof that she had chosen love over despair. The human often smiled at her scars. "They tell your story," he said once. "And your story is beautiful." The words still made her chest tremble. Once she would have hidden her body in shame. Now she allowed him to see every scar, every line, every wound. Because in his eyes, they were not marks of failure. They were marks of survival. Slowly, the galaxy began to hear whispers. Raiders spoke of a giant who had destroyed fleets for the sake of one human. Traders carried rumors of a monster who was not a monster, but a guardian. Some feared the tale. Others dismissed it as fantasy. But to the giant and the human, the galaxy's whispers did not matter. What mattered was the truth between them. One evening, as the sun set over the mining world, the sky burned red and gold. The giant stood at the edge of the cliffs, her glowing eyes reflecting the light. The human stood beside her, his small form wrapped in the wind. She looked down at him, her voice quiet but filled with certainty. The galaxy will always see me as too big, too dangerous, too unwanted. He shook his head. His hand found hers, pressing against her massive skin. Let them see what they want. I see the truth. I see the one who fought for me. The one who gave me life when I could have lost it. To me, you are not too big. To me, you are beautiful. Her heart swelled with warmth. The chains of her past fell away completely. She bent low, lowering her head until her eyes met his. And to me, she whispered, you are the reason I was born. The wind carried their voices into the sky. The stars began to appear, one by one, as if the universe itself listened. For centuries she had walked alone, believing she was nothing but exile. Now, with one human at her side, she had discovered something greater. She had discovered that love could turn even the darkest silence into light. Together, they left the ruins behind. They built more than shelter. They built a home. He brought life to the small things. She brought strength to the great ones. Where once she was feared, now she was cherished. Where once he was fragile, now he was guarded by a power no fleet could break. The galaxy still called her unwanted. But their voices no longer mattered. Because in his arms, in his voice, in his eyes, she had found her place. She was no longer exile. She was no longer mistake. She was loved. And as the stars burned above them, the giant and the human began a new story. A story not of loneliness, not of despair, but of love that no chain, no fleet, and no galaxy could destroy. It was their new beginning.